The Fourth International Conference on Positive Aging, hosted by the Institute for Social Innovation at Fielding Graduate University, was held recently in Los Angeles at the California Endowment Center for Nonprofit Management. The goal of the conference planners was to explore the ways in which the themes of wellness, community, life transitions, and creativity contribute to positive aging, which involves taking control of one's life, being active in the community, engaging with others, building close relationships, and seeking meaning and purpose. Life Transition Plenary speaker Nancy Anderson is a career and life consultant based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She's hosted her own radio program on KGO in San Francisco and has spoken to numerous civic and professional groups about the importance of finding the right niche in work for seniors. She was introduced to the conference by Barbara Bapkirk, owner of Heart at Work, based in Portland, Maine, and offering career counseling and second half of life planning.
Good morning. My pleasure to introduce Nancy Anderson, a friend and colleague whom I've known for several decades now. If you were to go to Amazon.com today and put in the two words, work and passion, you'd come up with 5,000 plus choices. That's a big PayPal account. But in 1984, if you were to search the same things on your Borders bookstore, you'd have one choice, and that would have been Work with Passion by Nancy Anderson. Nancy is a pioneer. She, in fact, is the first person to come up with a concept and introduce it to us that you can combine work, for which you receive money, and your passion. I first met Nancy shortly after her book was published. I was at Bowdoin College, and I invited her to come to speak to alumni, students, and faculty. She was a hit. But what she might not know is that that was a very fortuitous time for me to have invited her, because it really changed the course of my career development. Because of Nancy's perceptive questions, focused questions, I was able to understand and see more clearly what was keeping me from connecting my passion with my work. So for that, I'm forever grateful. In 2010, Nancy's second book was published, Work with Passion in Midlife and Beyond. This book invites and encourages people in the second half of life to have hope and to recognize that they still have another chance to combine what they do for work and for a living with what their passion is. So I invite you all to give a passionate welcome to my friend and colleague, Nancy Anderson.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to meet somebody exactly where it's going to lead. When she first invited me to come back to Bowdoin, I thought, how in the world am I going to manage living in California and Maine in the winter? But as it turned out, it was a very fortuitous, as she said, meeting, because I discovered that Maine in the winter is actually quite beautiful. And the college where she was offered me a chance to understand why it was, even way back then, I don't know that I could have quite articulated what was quite wrong, but in a homogeneous environment, which you often find in certain colleges or certain institutions, it really is very difficult for creativity to rear its head, because creativity thrives in variety. And I was noticing as I looked around at the conference here and the people that are here, you are the epitome of variety. You are all walks of life. You come from all kinds of families. And that really makes for a wonderful organization, and I congratulate Fielding for putting this together and bringing you all here. And thank you very much to Katrina and to her wonderful committee that's worked so hard to make this such a wonderful opportunity for you, and to Barbara for a great introduction. Now, normally what I do when I speak to people is I try to focus on you, and so that you get the most out of this and that you get what constitutes a free career counseling session with me. And that's pretty good since I charge $150 an hour. So what I'll do is I'm going to start with an introduction about who I am, what I do, how I work, and then we're going to break, and then I'm going to have my assistant Patrice to pass out a handout that you're going to fill out. I'll give you 10 minutes, and then I'm going to take volunteers, or appoint volunteers, as the case may be, and I'll give you some feedback on what it is that I think and I intuit about what it is that you respond. So let's look at today as going to be like an adventure that we're going to go on together, but intuition is going to be our tour guide. Because what I've discovered in my work with people, that it's my intuition that figures out what it is that's blocking them. I don't know how that works. It's something that it just comes to me. And I think that's what happened when I met Barb. When we were talking after I'd been at Bowdoin for a couple of days, I was fortunate enough to stay there long enough where I could really get a feeling for the place and what was going on. And I'll never forget the day, and we were talking. I don't know whether it was a dinner or whether we were getting ready for a talk or whatever, and I said to her, "Why are you here? Why aren't you on your own? Why don't you have your own thing?" It was so clear to me that she had this independent, creative part of her that was being thwarted. But you have to remember, that was back in 1984. Even then, career counselors per se were not as prolific as they are now. You know, it was still a relatively new field. In fact, when I started in 1976, there was no such thing as a career counselor. In fact, I had people ask me exactly what it is that you do, and this was before the book came out. And you know what? I didn't know what it was that I did, because they'd say, "Are you a recruiter? Are you, do you place people? I mean, what is it you do?" And it was very hard, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote Work with Passion, the first book, because it's a concept that is so hard to understand. You know, how do you get from here to actually doing what you love and making money at it? That concept was not in the mainstream at that time, and I can remember thinking in my office, my little basement office in San Francisco, thinking, "Am I nuts? You know, am I crazy? Because I'm asking people to do something that I wasn't even sure of what it was that I was doing." In other words, I was making it up as I went along, like, in the movies where you're just making up a story. But it was once I got on my own and doing the work, after I started off with a couple of partners, and then I went on my own, and then I started using what I had been trained to do as a writer to help my clients figure out what it is that they ought to be doing. Because I look at everybody as a story. So it's a literary approach that I take. Psychological, yes, but primarily literary. And that is that you're the main character in your story. You have supporting actors. You're here to do something. What? What are you supposed to get out of this particular lifetime? And believe it or not, that shows up with your grandparents. So what I decided to do one day, when I kept trying to I asked myself, why do these people keep coming back to me? Why don't they just go get a job and get happy? What am I doing wrong? You know, I'd help them get a job, and then 6 months later my phone would ring. It's like when I was bringing up my kids. You know, they go out and play, and they come in and say, "I don't have anything to do." And honestly, it was my training as a mother, I think, that actually helped me to be the best career counselor. To this day, it's my ability to hang in there with spoiled brats that makes me successful. Because I'm very good at unspoiling people. Because even though I have a very kindly exterior, there is a killer lurking behind that, which is not going to brook any, messing around. You're going to get on with it or don't bother me. And as I said, when somebody asked me, "Well, what is your main qualification for a client?" I said, "They got to entertain me." Because if they're not going to entertain me, they're going to bore me. As I said, the 11th commandment is, "Thou shalt not bore Nancy." So don't tell me things 3 times. You can tell me twice what a problem is, but the 3rd time you've lost me. So anyway, as I'm trying to figure out what is wrong with my client, which is the essence of passion, it's a problem you're trying to figure out. It's not something you're doing for money. It's something that your curiosity is dragging you kicking and screaming into trying to figure out what is this problem and why do they keep doing it and how can I solve it. And because of my interest in characterization and stories, I decided maybe I should ask them to write their story so that I can figure out, Because when you're working with people, if you don't get the whole story and you're only working with career, no, you're not going to get anywhere. You got to go back to the family. You've got to go back and see what the heck, how were these people brought up? Why do they believe what they believe? Why do they assume what they believe? And so I decided, well, as a writer, you're taught that you have to go back 2 generations in order to understand the main character of any story. So if you'll notice in the best novels you read, the best novelists, they're going to always plug in somehow back there to that grandparent so that you can understand why is the main character doing this. They may do it in a flashback. They may actually introduce you to the grandparents. Look at Jane Austen's novels, for example. She knew. See, she had that family instinct and understanding why certain people do what they do. Because it's family conditioning. It's very powerful. And depending on the culture that you grow up in, it's even more powerful. Like I have a lot of Middle Eastern